Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of Mike Nierychlo Online. So today's show, Marechal Foch. How many of you have ever tried Marechal Foch? I'm assuming not a whole heck of a lot of you, unless you're from BC. Seems like we plant a lot of it here, or it's one of the original plantings that was here as well. I guess to give you a little bit of the history of it, the name Marechal Foch, it was named after this significant marshal in World War I, Marshal Ferdinand Foch. It was developed by kind of a wine chemist, for lack of a better term, in the area of Alsace. It's a hybrid grape, and it was bred as a hardier variety, kind of a mildewy, disease-resistant variety, built for more of a moist, kind of cool climate. That's probably why they developed it up in the Alsace. There's still some plantings of it. Oh, and by the way, it's a red grape. There's still some plantings of it in the Loire in France, but I don't see it elsewhere in the world a whole heck of a lot, except for BC. I see a fair amount of it here. And Marechal Foch, like I said, is one of the original plantings that were here in BC. Marechal Foch, along with Baco Noir, a few other of these kind of hybrid grape varieties that they used that could sustain what they thought was a moister, cooler climate. Little did they know that the Okanagan would turn into a fabulous wine-growing region. Anyway, that's a bit of the history of Marechal Foch. If you're a winemaker from BC, if you're from BC, I'm sure you've heard of Marechal Foch. We do a lot of it here, especially in the lower mainland here, which is not the Okanagan. We're about 3 hours kind of, I guess, southwest of the Okanagan. It's a lot cooler and wetter here, close to the coast. But there are wine growers and wineries doing a fair amount of Marechal Foch here as well, because it survives quite nicely. As well on the islands as well. Vancouver Island, Saturna Island. Out in the Gulf Islands, a fair amount of Foch is planted. Again, kind of a cooler, moist climate. And it stands up really well against disease and mildew and things like that. Marechal Foch, I guess, for flavor characteristics, can be equated to kind of the Gamay grape or Beaujolais to a degree. It's kind of known for being quite fruit forward, as opposed to kind of a tannic tail end. Foch has always had a very acidic, tart tail end. A lot of nice bright acidity, making it more food friendly. There's a few producers in the Okanagan that do a beautiful job of it. I've got a couple here that I've never tasted before. I'm excited to try them. I've made some made some wine from Marechal Foch. It's a good grape to work with. One thing that's very well known for is young Foch tends to not make the best wine. But with age, older vines produce beautiful wine from Foch. I find it's slightly more acquired taste when it comes to wine, but I'm all over Foch. I really enjoy what it has to offer. So let's get into them today. The first one I have is the 2007 Marechal Foch from Recline Ridge. Let's see, nestled in the heart of Shuswap Lake, British Columbia. Now, Shuswap area is a little bit more, I guess, northwestern of the Okanagan. Again, it's a slightly cooler climate up there. Did you have a look at the bottle there? And I'm going to get right into this one. See what it has to offer. Both VQA approved wines. It's kind of one of our Canadian standards on wine. Both the wines today are from the Okanagan. And like I said, the Okanagan is a good example of Marechal Foch, because you don't see it very often elsewhere. I'd be really curious to see if there's any other parts of the world planting a whole heck of a lot of it. I'd love to try them. So that's something for you guys to comment on. If you've had a great Marechal Foch from somewhere else in the world that's a single varietal, not used as a blend, I'd love to hear about it. Like I said, BC does a fair amount of it. Wow, okay, you can tell this is a cooler climate wine right away. It's an extremely different wine on the nose. It's very gamey, but as well it's very green. Not green like young wine, but green like very vegetal. Wow, I'm going to go with almost like cabbage leaf. Cabbage leaf, there's a fair amount of red fruit coming through as well. Kind of maybe your, where would I go with that? Almost like your boysenberry or something like that, like a wild berry. Yeah, definitely kind of a green, tart wild berry nose to it, kind of gamey. And almost kind of cabbage leaf or something like that. yeah, that's kind of the best way I can describe it. Green soft vegetal, something along those lines. Almost slightly stinky, a little bit, kind of like when Grandma was making the cabbage rolls in the oven, and yeah, you got that smell. Very different. Should seek this one out just for the nose. It smells like and I've noticed that with cooler climate wines, especially ones made in the lower mainland here, they are a fair amount greener. They have a very different aspect than they're used to as opposed to those hot, hardy climate wines. Okay. Now on the palate on this one, it's got an interesting flavor. An ever so slight hint of, it's almost like salt water, like a salted aspect. And it's quite green on the palate, but tart, like tart red fruit, very tart red fruit. Like, actually, you know what it very much reminds me of? Picking raspberries. You throw a bunch in your mouth, but you get one of the green ones. It hasn't ripened very much. It reminds me of very underripe raspberry, with a really tart, almost puckery acidity. Extremely different wine. I find it very interesting. Quality-wise, as for quality, I mean, it doesn't have a whole lot of structure or backbone, a fair amount of tart acidity, a fair amount of neat, interesting tart flavors on it. Not a whole heck of a lot of length. I would have to say I'd give this, as for quality, not the best example of Marechal Foch. I had one the other day, and I'll be having some more in the near future to show you. I'm going to say I'll give this 84 points for quality. Not the highest quality palate wine, not the highest quality made wine, but extremely interesting. I find it very interesting on the nose and palate. There's nothing foul about it by any means. But very different and interesting. So that was the first one. So that's what I'm rating it. It's a very interesting wine, and I'll give it 84 points for quality. And like I said, Recline Ridge, they're up in the Shuswap area, much cooler climate area than the downtown Okanagan. My second one, the Old Vines Foch. Now they're claiming Old Vines Foch, and this when you say Old Vines, like I said, some of the original plantings in BC. So when you go Old Vines, they tend to produce a better quality of fruit. So this is the 2006 Old Vines Foch from First Estate Cellars. Yeah, look at that one there. How do you like it? You can see a little bit of progress behind me here. Like I mentioned in a previous episode, I'm starting to frame in the cellar door. Excited to get the cellar all framed in. You can't see behind the camera here, but there's 2x4s and tools and a couple tools sitting on the bench back here. And I got some plywood, things like that. Excited to do it. The door's leaning up right back there as well. I think this weekend is when I'm going to kind of pound away at it. Okay, now here's something about it. I didn't mention the color of that one, but this is kind of the classic color of Foch. They've quite often mentioned this as a kind of an inky ruby color, inky red ruby color. I'll let you show that. Or let you see that. Very classic color of Foch, inky ruby color. When I say inky, it's almost like it's so, when it compounds on itself, it's like black. You can't really see through the glass. Very just inky ruby, like I said. Let's see what this one has to offer. Whew. Okay. Where are these guys? These are Peachland, hotter area. I think this episode might turn into a different lesson than just on Foch. Bear with me for 1 second. Okay, you got one example of Foch. The second one, the episode just turned into a new learning curve for you. I can't use this as an example of Foch because this wine is considered, you could call it corked. Corked is one way of putting it. But corked in wine, if you ever open a wine and you taste it, it tastes over tannic, like it just dries out your whole mouth, like you just sucked on a whole bunch of cotton balls. And you get this newspaper cardboard flavor. That's a corked wine. That's caused by TCA It's this chemical that a bad cork will give off, and it'll kind of convert the wine into this really foul flavor. This one's not corked, but it's oxidized, or it's been oxygenated too early and prematurely. The reason I know this one has been, I'm just going to call it corked for this episode. The reason I know it's corked, or too much oxygen has been allowed in there, might be too big of a crack or something in the cork. Yeah, if I kind of pull the cork open, I can see kind of red seeping into the cork. So I'm assuming too much oxygen got into here just sitting on the shelf in the store. It smells like sherry, is basically what it smells like. It's nutty, and when they make sherry, it's done in such a fashion that in the huge barriques or whatever, the oak casks that it's done in, they allow amount of oxygen into it to give it its nose and its nutty flavors, which are very elegant in sherry on the white grape they use for it. In a red wine, not so much. So this smells like sherry. It smells kind of like almond paste. It's over-oxidized. I'm curious, that's why I keep spinning it to see if it'll blow off and give me a sort of flavor profile, but I don't think it will. It just kind of smells like salted nuts. Kind of like the inside of an oak barrel. Not overly excited about it. But if you ever do come across like a wine like this, take your receipt, take the wine back to the store, and they'll gladly return it for you. I'm going to taste it anyway, see what it happens to do. Yep. So there you have it. One example of Foch, and one example of a prematurely oxidized wine. Like I said, like it got too much oxygen on it in the cell or something. I'm getting zero flavor profile on the palate. It's almost vinegary. That's why I spit it out right. Almost vinegary. You're really tasting the alcohol. The nose just smells kind of like salted nuts, almost like salt water. There's nothing about it that tastes good. So I can't rate this wine or anything. But we've learned a new lesson on today's episode. And who knows, maybe I'll come across a corked wine for you as well so I can give you an example of it. But like I said, this one's over-oxidized. A corked wine is the description I gave you before. It tastes like damp cardboard. It's goopy. It leaves your mouth feeling very dry and puckery. In this case, it's just prematurely oxidized. Zero flavor, and just kind of like vinegary. Just too bad it's spoiled. You get a little bit like a tart black fruit or something through it. Anyway, that's it for today's episode. I'll have to do another episode on Foch down the road, just so I can give you a better example of it. Yeah, Foch, another different variety like I did last time, Viognier, Foch. I got some more coming up for you. Comment below, let me know what weird or different varieties you've tried. There's so many different interesting ones from around the world with crazy names. Let me know what you've tried out, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks for coming out.